Hello, this is Lani Milbus for Effing the Ineffable. This is really kind of in response to some questions I found on the internet today on Facebook. One of them was a damn fine magician and scholar whom I know personally, was posting questions about the lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram, and with some particular attributions and details. Very good questions, very practical questions, and no doubt things that he's putting to good, excellent use at this time. In response, I'd posted, because he was concerned with the various teachers presenting the material in different ways, and for that ritual being de-emphasized in Aleister Crowley's system, which I completely understand. I'd posted a response from a Reddit thread in which some of the teachings were described as being from a different perspective, from a more advanced grade of AA. Now, there's nothing I hate more than the person who says, "Oh, it's beyond your grade. I'm not gonna. You wouldn't understand," because that's bullshit. That's horseshit. One of the two animals, it's their excrement. Anyone, I believe, has had perspectives from Kether, perspectives from Tefereth, perspectives from Malkuth, and everyone's been there. Everyone knows the ins and outs of all of the different levels of attainment. Some have worked really hard to make some of the attainments more permanent than others, but everyone has access to the information, so it's not beyond anyone's grade. However, in terms of grades of AA specifically, and of Golden Dawn, some of the rituals are de-emphasized for various reasons, and the Reddit thread had commented that there were various reasons for the rituals being hidden until a certain point in Golden Dawn advancement for various reasons because of perspective, which in turn was the cause for the attributions being different, because you're at a different perspective. You know, if you're in the northern hemisphere, you're going to have an entirely different set of direction than you would if you were standing upside down, or from that perspective upside down in the other hemisphere. So it all depends on where you're at. That said, the banishings of the celestial bodies, maybe even zodiacal, are from the perspective of a Malkuth work, from a work that's based in the Kabbalistic world, the material world, of Asaya, is going to be different than it is from another perspective. So if you're working within the spheres of the elements, down in Malkuth, according to the Tree of Life, of course, all of the planetary influences can be viewed as macrocosmic. They are above the sphere that you're currently in the Kabbalistic scheme. They are then going to be viewed as powers that are not necessarily present, that can be possibly manipulated for purposes within that particular sphere. As you ascend, say you're in the sphere of Tefereth, which is the Adeptus Minor grade and one of the grades alluded to in the Golden Dawn system, invoking or banishing planetary influences from the sphere of the sun is not as necessary. All of these planets are sustained in their course by the sun. The sun already has power over them. So elaborate rituals to banish or invoke these forces would be kind of synonymous or analogous to someone, say, wanting to write on a piece of paper, write a poem, so they do an elaborate ritual to banish their left arm so that they may use their right. It's just not as effective. There's not really as much purpose for it as there is when you're in a different sphere. Now, if you're talking about the sphere of Kether, there is nothing to be invoked or banished. You're at that point, you're at the crown. You're at the state of all. So my point is that if you look at Aleister Crowley's writings, all of them, you will rarely find anything about any temporal power being manipulated with magic. It kind of seems like it's alluded to, and a lot of people talk to that point, but Aleister Crowley doesn't have any manuals about how to gain love through magical means, or how to get money through magical means, or any of the stuff that you find in, say, Agrippa, or any of the older works, the more mundane magic. Crowley's purpose in pretty much all of his teachings, all of his systems, especially AA, is purely the transcendence of the corporeal perspective. It's all about turning the magic on the magician and changing self, or rather not changing the actual self with a big S, but changing the perspective on self, or what we believe our self is. It's about attaining right perspective and aligning, essentially, the same as yoga, which is union with God. That's Crowley states again and again. That's the purpose. And one of the reasons that one in those types of works would not want to deal with the mundane forms of magic, such as invoking Jupiter for money, or Mars for strength or revenge, or Venus for love, or any of that stuff, is that, one, all of those things can be attained through spirit. If one is so situated in spirit that they're absolutely one with their true will, there is an aspect of self, or a spirit that goes before the practitioner, before the spiritual aspirant, to give them everything they need before they even know they need it. So if all of the conscious focus is on attaining that state, there's never a reason to do a work of magic to gain something worldly. Using the spiritual power in order to control the material is a miss. It's a misuse of the power in a sense. However, in a sphere of Malkuth, where you're calling upon these forces from the perspective of the material, it's not necessarily, it's a little more of a gray area. However, there is the accumulation of karma, and someone who is seeking to transcend the corporeal perspective and abide entirely in the spirit, attaining more karma is not that's counterproductive. It's taking one step forward and two steps back. So those rituals, while they're not a sin or punishable or anything weird like that, they're counterproductive, and they just tend to not be done. If you look at an example that I learned from Swami Mukundananda, I don't know if it's a true story or not, but it's about Swami Vivekananda, who Crowley admired and studied and recommended and actually included in his curriculums. There's a story of Swami Vivekananda walking with a yogi, just talking about the various yoga things they talk about, and they come to a river. And the yogi that Swami Vivekananda is with wants to, display his powers. He starts walking on the water. And he's walking on the water across the river and stops about halfway through to see Swami Vivekananda still standing on the banks looking at him. And he says, "Come on." Vivekananda says, No. And the yogi continues walking across the river to the other side, waving at him. Come on. Swami Vivekananda says, No. So Swami Vivekananda walks down the banks of the river to a boatman sitting at the side and says, "Will you take me across the river?" The boatman says, "Sure, it will cost you 2 paise." So he gives the man 2 paise and is ferried across the river, and shortly meets up with his yogi friend. His yogi friend says, "What good is your sadhana if you cannot even walk across water? What has God given you? You cannot even walk across water. You don't even have this city." this mystic ability. And Swami Vivekananda's response was, your sadhana is worth 2 paise. I crossed the river for 2 paise, and you used this mystic ability to cross the river. The point being, and he'd also stated that, and the more you use these mystic abilities, the more they diminish, and the more your spiritual prowess, your spiritual connection, power diminishes. So it's kind of just a common thought that you don't use the spiritual to control the material at some point. At some point, you're giving up control, and you're realizing the oneness with the source of everything, and realizing that will just take care of you, and that your only concern is your connection and relationship with that. So, at some stage, and I've had a current shift somewhat recently where I don't really use a banishing ritual anymore. I'll kind of do it, not for my practices, or really invoking rituals other than invoking the one, because it's just not necessary. I reached a point where my human mind doesn't know what I need as much as my soul does. So the things of which I am materially conscious aren't really relevant. They're attachments. They're, in a way, they're obstacles. So for some works, I'll do like a quick proxy banishing, like basically just like a spirit bomb, just to make sure that I'm in the center of that before doing my work. And I'm sure that nothing can approach me, such as with these rituals, that if you're in Kether, if you're in a state, can we call it a Ketheric state? I don't know. But if you're in that state and you're trying to invoke a lower sphere, you're really denying the power that you've attained. You're denying the higher perspective from which you stand, which is kind of off. And again, that's not to say that these works are bad. And anyone who's feeling drawn to them and feeling like they're doing them are in a stage in their life, in my belief, that they absolutely need that. And that some part of doing that and exhausting that curiosity, exhausting that work, is beneficial to them at the higher levels as well. And it shouldn't be discarded. It's just to say that it's not emphasized enough at higher levels is the reason that I want to address this here. That it's like a tool, you need it. Like a snake absolutely needs its skin. It crawls along the ground. It can get cut up. It needs a protective layer. However, at some point, it has to be willing to keep in the back of its mind or know that at some point that skin is going to come off and the new skin will be replacing it. And that's kind of what this is. You need to work really hard at the things that you feel drawn to. You need to exhaust all of the knowledge you can get about them and do everything you can to fully understand and master these skills, but also be willing to accept that, hey, in a year or 2 years or however long it might be, I may not need this. But right now I do, and right now I'm doing this, and this is really cool. And then you can teach it, and you can explore with it and use it to its end, and that's great and necessary, and I highly encourage it if my opinion matters on that to anyone. But yeah, at some point with all ideas and all models and all tools, one has to be willing to accept that it's all going to go away, if for no other reason that none of this is going with you when your body dies, right? All of the knowledge you store in your brain is going to go away. All of those memories and those types of things. Learning how to walk. That's why you're incarnated. The baby doesn't immediately get up and walk and start doing rituals and stuff. All that stuff's gone. And according to the Bhagavad Gita, these types of things that you do, these rituals and things like that, if that is your sole dependence, you are actually reincarnated into the celestial spheres until you've exhausted your austerities, I guess I'd say, that you've earned from doing the celestial works, the rituals, the adoration of the planets and all these things. And it is a heightened state. But once that's exhausted, you're born again into the material sphere, because these aren't the goal. The goal is to transcend these. And the only way to be released, according to the Bhagavad Gita, from the cycle of life and death is to go beyond that and make all of your devotion and focus, or as much as you possibly can, beyond any of this celestial sphere, just to the one, as the Bhagavad Gita says, toward Krishna, which is the personal form of God. And it's clarified you can worship any one of his forms, the same, as long as you understand that it's that one God that is the recipient of the devotion, that one spirit. So from that perspective, the control of material or celestial forces from the perspective of Kether or beyond, from the perspective of the absolute nothing, whatever you want to call it, is pointless. It's not what you're after. So, and as the system of AA clearly states that an ipsissimus, once someone reaches ipsissimus, I don't know how often that's happened, or I think it might be magus. Once attained to that level, you declare your word in magus, and then you're cast into a lower sphere. So all of these tools, it's when you slough off the skin, you may need that knowledge again at some point. So again, it's not worthless. Don't just give up and not do any work and say, well, I'm just going to be this sitting here humming as this one divine entity. I mean, unless you're obviously, the Buddha or something. But you also need to be willing to give up these ideas and understand that if some people, which, the friend that wrote the question totally gets it. He's totally accepting of everyone else. I think he's just really curious about this and excited. But I also know that there are people out there that would benefit from knowing that, to judge what other people think is important in terms of magic it's not helpful, and there is a high likelihood that you're completely misperceiving the whole thing. So yeah, that is my perspective on the de-emphasis of the lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram and other such things from the higher grades, and just from Crowley's system in general. And I just wanted to present that verbally as opposed to trying to write it out, because that's a lot of information. So that's it. I hope somebody finds this helpful, and I'll be posting again soon. Thank you for listening.